everybody loves an underdog, don't they?
Yeah.
Except Yankees fans.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of hate that kind of person. Well, and I kind of understand it where there's like, I just like the best. So, they like the Yankees, and then they like, I don't know what the equivalent of the football team would be. I guess they like the Patriots. They just like the winners,
Yeah.
I kind of like the losers.
Yeah. I think to do the kind of music that we do, you kind of have to.
Done right, an extinguished crutch of a rolling inside. Yellow fingers, nothing lasts, but nearly everything lingers in life.
Hi, I'm Elia Einhorn. Welcome to the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Here at the Talkhouse, we pair notable musicians for thoughtful, unmoderated conversations and release a new talk each week. Regular listeners will have caught episodes like Andy Rourke of the Smiths and Dolores O'Riordan of the Cranberries discussing their new band Dark, or the recent Pitchfork Music Festival backstage chat between Shamir and Porch's Aaron Main. Check out these and all of our past episodes, and subscribe to get new ones on Stitcher or iTunes. Today's episode is a matchup of two of current rock's most intelligent, biting lyricists, Joe Casey of Proto-Martyr and Andrew Savage of Parquet Courts. Parquet Courts formed 6 years ago in New York City. They're directly in the art punk lineage, pairing co-frontmen Andrew Savage and Austin Brown's smart, often political, very meta lyrics with flailing guitars to brilliant effect. Occasionally, they even forgo lyrics, as with their 2015 EP Monastic Living, where they proclaim on the first track, "I don't want to be an essayist," and the other 8 tracks are instrumentals. Earlier this year, the band released their 5th album, Human Performance, on Rough Trade. The group are partway through a world tour supporting the critically acclaimed LP. 3 excellent records into their career, Proto-Martyr have become one of the darkest and most exciting bands around. Vocalist Joe Casey's songs are filled with characters slowly drowning in the quiet horrors of life, even as the band rocks out behind him. Last year's LP, The Agent Intellect, is emotionally wrenching, with lyrics addressing Casey's mother's Alzheimer's disease, and a song written from the perspective of his deceased father waiting for his wife to join him on the other side. The group's sparse, post-punk guitar attack perfectly frames the brutal narratives. Fittingly, Casey and Savage met at a show when Savage's old band, Fergus and Geronimo, was on tour and caught Proto-Martyr in their earliest days, back when Kevin Boyers of Tyvek, the Detroit punk band that Casey roadied for, played in an early iteration of the group. Earlier this year, the friends and mutual admirers caught up and discussed writing highly personal lyrics about people they love, how Tyvek are the Michigan Talking Heads, ideas for their bands that seemed good in theory but didn't quite work out, and, in a follow-up to a piece Casey wrote for the Talkhouse, why they'd rather be compared to their peers than bands from the past. Check it out.
Hot dog ketchup, main ingredients. Swears and flawless English, it's the best in town. Funny how a sameness cannot be distinguished. Strangeness is relieving when you point it out. Email, poem, slogans on examples.
So the first time that I saw Proto-Martyr, Kevin Boyer was in the band. It was at, what's the place in Hamtramck? Is it Painted Lady?
Yeah, Painted Lady. Yeah.
It was at Painted Lady. It was with Fergus and Geronimo.
That's right. Yeah.
That would have been a pretty early show, right?
Yeah, that would be, that would have been, like the first couple months of the band. Like Kevin helped us out for a while playing bass, and then once I think we got Scotty in, I think Kevin went on a tour and then came back and maybe played guitar, like second guitar for 1 or 2 shows, and then that was it. Yeah, so that was very early days.
Yeah, and then the next time was on December 22nd, the first day of the first Parquet Courts tour, and that was at Jumbo's.
Right.
And so that would have also been pretty early. That was probably just not much more than a year later, I think.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
And I remember in those days you would use a table sometimes, right?
Yeah.
As like a stage prop.
Yeah, but it was my stage prop, and I still occasionally, if I can find one, grab it and bring it up. But back then it was like a full-size table.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that actually came from seeing The Fall play once, and it was like after like Marky Smith like broke his hip or something. So he just sat at the table for the whole show, and I liked that. I didn't sit at the table, but I liked that he sat at the table and folded and unfolded a towel for the whole set. And I thought, that's cool. He was like just singing and folding and unfolding at the top.
So in a way, the table is kind of your other instrument.
Yes, that is.
Yeah, you play
and
the
I have
table.
found my newest passion is originally I would request that I'd have just a straight vocal mic stand, not like the guitar ones. But apparently those are hard to come by, so I get the guitar stand, where the bins in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I like kind of deconstructing those stands throughout the show. So that's been kind of my prop now, is that.
It would look good on a liner credit to have Joe Casey vocals table on there.
Yeah, and then we originally kind of started out with a lot of I really wanted, when we sang baseball bat, I really wanted to bring out a novelty-sized bat and swing it around and threaten the band with it, but props kind of went by the wayside. So I'm glad you remembered the table.
Now, you toured before Proto Martyr, right?
Yeah, just touring with Tyvek, just as their roadie, but I was pretty lazy. I never really did. I sold some merch, I think.
Yeah. Now, one thing I know that you've done for this website, Joe, the Talkhouse, is you wrote a piece about how a lot of times people compare Proto Martyr to what band was it?
We got
Interpol.
Interpol and Joy Division.
Yeah. It was Interpol, which bewildered you.
Yeah.
And me too, as a Proto Martyr fan. But Parquet Courts have bands like that too, that people say, hey, you sound like this band, and it's not an influence, but it's not incorrect because that's their opinion. But I've always thought it was kind of a shame that Parquet Courts and Proto Martyr, I think we have a kinship. We're all friends, and we've played together a lot. That we don't get that. We don't kind of get compared to our peers enough, I think. But also, I think
right.
And speaking of Kevin, I think Tyvek. Definitely a big influence on Parquet Courts. I would assume Proto Martyr too. And
100%. Yeah.
Do you think that they're like me? Do you think that they're maybe one of the most unheralded rock bands in the U.S.?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And I think they're much more influential than people realize.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm thinking because I know I've heard the new Tyvek record, and I hope it comes out this year.
I have too. It's great.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I'm kind of looking back because when I was a fan, they put me on tours a couple times, just helping them out. Seeing that they've kind of survived that wave from the bands that they played with. A lot of times are no longer. They're one of the few bands that are still around from that kind of era.
It's true. I mean, they kind of gained their initial notoriety in the kind of garage turbo scene of the mid 2000s. But I feel like there's so many of those bands are gone, but Tyvek is still there. And I mean, to me, just the Michigan Talking Heads, really, for me.
The Michigan Interpol, even. Yeah, I mean, it's just that was kind of the thing. Was and I kind of, part of me feels a little bit like I wouldn't go as far as to say guilty, but I feel like. A lot of, if we ever get any shine or any praise, I always kind of want to throw it back on the bands that, I liked and are still around and still doing stuff,
Yeah.
I get a little bit weirded out when people are like, oh, you're such a great lyricist. And I'm like, I'm okay, but you should definitely read Kevin's lyrics.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I like the point, I'd rather be compared to my contemporaries than some band from 30 years ago, that sort of thing.
Agreed.
Because that's more influential to me than, that was the point of that Talkhouse article was I really did not listen or know about what Interpol was about, so getting compared to them was kind of weird. I had to kind of go back and, I reviewed the new record, which was completely okay, but I was like, really, is this what you get from us? Because it's completely, I like it better when we were in, was it Iowa City, and this kid, it must have been maybe 14, was like, you guys sound like a drunk cake. And I said, okay, now that's
finally
that's
something I can get behind.
Yeah, Yeah, I like it when it's like completely left field and you're like, really? Okay. But yeah, your opinions are never wrong, but opinions are often weird. What's the new stuff that you're getting compared to?
Well, I don't know, because, our last record was an instrumental record, and I don't know if that got too many comparisons, favorable or otherwise, but I guess I haven't heard too much feedback on the next record, Human Performance, because, there haven't been any reviews yet. It's not out yet. But we've gotten The Strokes a lot, and Pavement a lot, which are two bands that are, they're great. They're good bands. Not bands that I say would necessarily be considered strong influences on the group. But that was a tough thing for me to kind of to get over, because it kind of, it put me in a point of being indignant where I had to realize that, these were people's opinions that might not have been acquainted with all the influences that I was drawing from. So I couldn't, look at people and tell them they were wrong, because they're coming to this conclusion by themselves. But it still was frustrating in a lot of early Parquet Courts interviews. I think it was a lot of writers, journalists who were telling us what we sounded like, which is annoying when people are interviewing you, and instead of asking you what turns you on, they're telling you, what turns you on.
Yeah, and they word it in such a way where you can't really say, like, they're like, I'm getting a lot of Parquet or Pavement vibes from you guys, and you're like, well, okay, if that's what you get, then yeah. Oh, and that is like, because for our first 3 or 4 years of existence, we played to like our friends, so they all knew, like, okay, this is a band that's influenced by Tyvek. We didn't even have to really talk about it. And then when you get to a certain level where you're talking to people that probably never heard of Tyvek, you can't really correct them. But no, actually our influences are this, this, and this. It's kind of a weird game to play.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that instrumental, because that record was like the first for Rough Trade, right?
That was the first one on Rough Trade.
And was that an easy sell to them? Like, hey, here, release this? Yeah.
Well, Jeanette Lee and Jeff Travis, the founders of Rough Trade, are still, are still the people running the show over there. And you got to think they put out, records by, Cabaret Voltaire and Pere Ubu. Right. And so, even though kind of they haven't put out an experimental instrumental record in a while, it's definitely part of their history, and definitely for me, makes up the bulk of my favorite Rough Trade releases. And they've been wonderful to work with, and no, they've never really put the kibosh on any idea I've given them. It's always been met with excitement. Yeah, I think that's the joy, but just the whole kind of record business thing where they're telling you what to do. Like, I luckily have not, knock on wood, experienced that, where people are like, where's the hit, or, write this or that. And and that's what I like about Parquet Courts, though, is that you guys can release like an instrumental album, very conceptual too. The fact that, you talk about not talking in the first song, and then the rest of it is no talking. And then I've heard the new record, and I think it's great, So to be able to do whatever you want is kind of a joy, I think. I think so. There's no rules to what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have. Is there any Proto-Martyr rules? I don't think so.
We have the only person that can wear shorts in the band is Max.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's our rule.
We're definitely a no shirt. You have to wear a shirt. You can't take your shirt off at any time. That's a good one. It was originally a no beard. I thought no beards, but Greg has recently grown one. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, and Scott's rocked one before.
Yeah, but he's got such a light one.
It's like it's clear, really. He's got a clear beard. Yeah. You barely notice it.
Yeah, originally I really wanted people to, I kind of almost wanted a uniform, and I'm glad we didn't do it, because I kind of like the fact that Scott wears what he wears, and, originally I thought we should dress up a little bit more, but I'm the only one that took to it. Was there any rules that you guys had that you kind of discarded early on?
Let's see. Oh, yeah, for sure. We used to have a no photos rule. We used to not take any pictures. That was a rule until that it got harder to do than to just, okay, let's take a picture. And it turns out when you tell people, well, the rule was we don't pose for pictures, but if you want to take a picture of us paparazzi style, go ahead. And when you give someone carte blanche like that to just take a picture of you while you're not posing, it makes for a really terrible picture. I found out.
No.
It's just you at the worst angle with like 3 chins.
Yes, well, that's me. That's every photo of me ever. Because I hate every single photo I see of me like performing. I'm like, okay, you waited till my mouth was like, obviously you're a photographer, you're gonna wait for something, and my mouth is completely open, and at my stupidest, you know. I do think occasionally on stage I look pretty cool, but they've never captured it.
Yeah. I had to eat my words on that one because we weren't making many photographer friends, and we just had all these, you know, crappy pictures that kept getting reused, and eventually we're like, well, might as well take some good pictures. It's actually kind of more of a pain in the ass to have to deal with these.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the same thing I've realized with videos. Like, that's kind of one thing where people are like, oh, you have to do videos. And I was originally like, no, we don't. But then now, if we don't make an official video, somebody on YouTube will make one, and it will be like, for the longest time, we had like, somebody made one for Come and See, and it's like, he must have taken it from some weird foreign movie, but it's like kind of a disgusting video. And it's got like the most views of any one of our videos, and it's like a fake video. So I realized, like, okay, you can't not make videos because someone will just make one and people will assume that you did the one with violence and blood all over the place, you know. So,
but for the most part, rules are, you know, they're made to be broken, aren't they?
Yes, truly.
Proto Marty's your first band.
Right.
Before that, you were just a friend on the road.
Yeah, I was just an enthusiast, you know.
A rock fan.
Yeah.
And you met a lot of friends that way, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's actually how, you know, by being with Tyvek was kind of how I was able to make this band. Was like, you know, you go on tour, you go to Philly, you meet Tom Lax, you go to Seattle. Like, at the time, Ruben, I just knew Ruben from being in a band, the Coconut Cool-Outs.
Cool-Outs, Lacey, yeah, and Pete.
Yeah, so you just meet these people on tour, and then I knew when we were starting the band, I'm like, oh, I can send this out to Tom. I can send this out to, you know, people in California that I met, and I can send this out to Ruben. I didn't even know that Ruben was working at Hardly Art at the time. I just sent it to him because I was sending it out to people that I met, and that's kind of how we got signed, was just kind of dumb luck.
Yeah, Fergus and Geronimo too. I met Ruben through Kevin Pedersen.
Yeah. So we'd be like, yeah, you send stuff out to Kevin, you send stuff out to DJ Rick in Davis, California. Yeah. You know, it was like that kind of like the cool people you meet on the road. For me, was kind of like, oh, this is like a lot of fun, you know, and it was fun seeing my friends play different places, you know, especially when we went to Europe. I was able to go to Europe with them just to see like, oh, right, you know, people in Germany are into Tyvek. This is insane. So having that experience was like, oh, being in a band is kind of fun and maybe worth doing.
I know exactly where I was when I first saw you, the way I see you now through these eyes, waiting to retry those pristine days I recall so fondly. So few are the trials when a life isn't lonely, and now if only I never felt it.
Detroit is an interesting city in that it's like New York, in that it's a city that people kind of fetishize, don't they?
They sure do.
And that's something that we get asked about that a lot. What's it like being a band in New York? But I would assume for entirely different reasons, Proto Martyr probably gets asked, what's it like being in a band from Detroit? Because Detroit has this kind of, this, I don't know if it's safe to call it like a myth of this like fantastic urban renewal going on. How do you react to that?
Well, before, early on, I'd always say, hey, watch RoboCop, because that's kind of, actually very true to what's going on in Detroit. And I still think it applies. Like the whole point in RoboCop is that they're trying to build a Delta City, and they're trying to get rid of old Detroit. And, I think it's kind of what's happening now. But I see it all over America where, everything is kind of the same.
Yeah, there is a kind of like an urban homogeny that's happening, whereas like you go to one coffee shop and you've seen them all, kind of thing.
Right. There's something funky on the wall, and that's
living in cities, we kind of like to pat ourselves on the back and tell us like, oh, we don't live in this sort of cookie cutter, Flintstones background of McDonald's, Starbucks. But we do in a way, because there's, urban living is kind of, it's branded, it's becoming this sort of static thing that you see, you see it in Oakland, you see it in Brooklyn, certainly, Detroit, Atlanta. It's like there are certain rules on how to gentrify a city, and everyone's following them.
Right, and I wish it's not like Detroit doesn't deserve nice things. Detroit definitely deserves like nice areas, or quote unquote. It's nice that a Whole Foods came into Detroit. That's great for people that want it. But I kind of wish that the process was a little bit more Detroit. Like it had its own kind of style, but it's just like anywhere else. If you go, and that's disappointing. Like I know where down the Cass Corridor, which people don't call it the Cass Corridor anymore. I mean, it used to be a very scary place to hang out, but you wouldn't want to go down there. And friends that have come back are just like, I cannot believe I'm seeing like people walking their dogs here now, whereas before you wouldn't want to go down there. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword. It's kind of like, I'm sure when people are like, oh yeah, New York in the 70s was so great. It's like, well, was it?
Depends who you ask, but and it's a kind of like, it's a sort of, there's a type of nostalgia that people are nostalgic for times that they didn't even experience, and that you find that sort of thing happening a lot. And so, it depends on who you ask. Like, is it good that this place is safer now? Yeah, sure. We can all agree on that. Is it a little bit more boring? Yeah, probably. And so I would have to think that New York and Detroit are similar in that way. Do you guys ever get baseball shit talk when you're playing?
Do I get it? No, not really. I mean, we get a lot of people like just saying like, "Hey, this isn't the Tigers' year" or whatever. Like, but really, because the only teams I think that Detroit's kind of a lovable team. I think people like the Tigers, whereas like I think in New York, if you're not, you only have the choice of being a Mets fan. Really, I think if you're a Yankees fan, then you're probably should get spit on quite a bit, I would think.
Yeah, so it's lonely at the top,
Yeah, so I think like the Mets seem to be like kind of like the lovable team there.
Everybody loves an underdog, don't they?
Yeah.
Except Yankees fans.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of hate that kind of person. Well, and I kind of understand it where there's like, I just like the best. So, they like the Yankees, and then they like, I don't know what the equivalent of the football team would be. I guess they like the Patriots. They just like the winners,
Yeah.
I kind of like the losers.
Yeah. I think to do the kind of music that we do, you kind of have to.
Right. Yeah, I only listen to popular music.
Yeah.
Well, we're not gonna.
I listen to the most popular stuff. Why would I go?
Right.
Why would I go past the top 40?
Yeah, I mean that's why it's there for. It's to show me what's the best song, and then I listen to it. Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Do you think music fans care what you and I have to say? Do you think it's important for musicians to talk about music? Because I sometimes wonder this.
I'm surprised. I didn't really, like, you start thinking, like, why do we have to talk so much?
Yeah.
Like, you don't, what is it? And I think it's because people assume that musicians lead amazing, exciting lives and have interesting and exciting opinions, but I found that not to be true, But I think people want to believe that. They want to believe that we're jet-setting around and, always at the best parties and,
Yeah, well, I mean,
have all
certainly
these anecdotes.
We don't always have the most interesting opinions.
No, yeah, I really don't have very many good opinions.
Well, sometimes I think, there are definitely other musicians that I've read or heard talk about music, and it's been really captivating. But sometimes, I get the feeling like, what more can I add? I've already written the songs, What more do I have to say? And that's kind of something that the first song on Monastic Living is kind of addresses, I think, this tendency for people to, kind of to want to overexpose themselves and overshare and say too much, So I always kind of wonder what could anybody possibly want to hear from me about music other than what we actually say.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's, I had that kind of moment where on the Agent Intellect, I'm like, okay, I want to write a song about Mom. And I've just figured I should do it because you never know like how many records you're going to have. I shouldn't like say, I'll put that off to the 5th record, because it might not be a 5th record. But then once I did that, I was kind of a little bit uncertain about like, all right, I just kind of told everybody that my mom is suffering from Alzheimer's. And then like that now is like an okay thing for people to talk about, and I can't just say like, no, actually don't talk about my mom, I've put that out there, and it's kind of like, oh boy, part of me regrets it, but then people have said, oh, thanks for writing the song and stuff, but it was kind of the first test for me to actually put out something kind of personal, and, in the future, am I going to do that? I don't know,
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. My mom was in jail, and I've wondered about addressing it in music form, if it's something that's worth expressing for me, or if it's something that might, if she ever found out about it, hurt her feelings. That's it's always a tough thing. How much do I give? How much do I put out there? How much do people need to know?
Right, and then you feel kind of like an idiot for even thinking about it, because then you're like, well, actually nobody really cares when it comes down to it. But some people do, and that's kind of the thing, is like, when you start thinking of yourself as a public person, is kind of a weird changeover in your mind. Like I am still surprised when people say, hey, Joe, and I've never met him before. I'm like, how do you know my name? I'm like, oh, well, of course.
You write any good songs lately?
No, that's the problem with being on the road. I don't. Do you write songs on the road? I find it impossible.
Tough.
Or something that's ridiculous.
No, it's hard. Well, there's when do you get the time to? Sometimes bits of songs will come to me on the road, but songwriting is one of those things where I kind of have to be, back at home in a domestic environment to do. But having said that, I have written songs on the road. It's not easy to do.
Right. I mean, I'll have like, I'll get like a turn of phrase or something, or have something happen to me that will influence a song. But our setup is we have to all be in the same room at the same time, and kind of like Greg will come up with like guitar parts and things. But as far as coming up with a song, we all have to be in the same room. So unless we're doing it at sound check, which I like to finish sound check as soon as possible. I don't want to.
Yeah, we've done that one too.
But yeah, I don't know. It's with all this touring, I hope that we can get back home. But once we get home, we got nothing going on, so we should do it pretty fast, I think. But I was going to ask you, in your band, like how are songs? Because like we're all in a room, kind of jamming, and I'm mumbling over it. Like, do you come in with like, this is a song, I've got it, or like, because I know.
I'm
in your band,
I'm mostly the one person that doesn't do that. Everybody else, when they write a song, they pretty much have it demoed out and ready to go. I do that sometimes, but I don't ever demo anything. I just teach it to the band. And sometimes we'll get to a part where it's like, okay, I don't know what to do here. Any ideas, But so I like the kind of camaraderie of collaborating with people. So yeah, for my songs, a lot of times they don't get fully fleshed out. I could have something even maybe 80%, 90% done, but they don't fully get fleshed out until Sean puts down a bass line, or Max or Austin throw in their 2 cents, and I like that. That's the way I like to do it. I I don't like as much being, saying, hey, do this, play this part like this,
Here's your bass part.
Which, I've done before, but really I think the magic really happens when, we all collaborate on something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how it works. Works for us, but, I wouldn't be against somebody coming with it with like a fully fleshed song, but then I'd be kind of like, well, no, I want to add my part,
Right. Well, but you're a proper lead singer of a band, Joe. You don't play an instrument. Your instrument is your voice.
Thank you for saying that.
Well, but do you ever throw in your 2 cents about a guitar line or anything?
There's been points where and I think it's just because there'll be a song where I'm like, this sounds. My go-to disparaging remark that I've used, I haven't done it recently, is it sounds like Canadian rock. And that's only because I grew up in Detroit and had to listen to a lot of like bad Canadian bands. There's a lot of great Canadian bands.
You picked up the Canadian radio station frequencies.
Yes, yeah. So, but yeah, I'll say, that sounds a little bit too Sum 41 or something like that. But that's about it. At the beginning, I was really trying to be the maestro, and I learned pretty early on that I couldn't tell the guys to do what I wanted them to do, and what they were doing was good enough, Yeah, but I have used "This sounds like Sum 41" before, and that has helped. But so here's a question, because people always ask me this one. Like they say, how do you have the lyrics fully formed? Do you write them out like poetry, or do you kind of what comes first?
Good question. Historically, lyrics have always come first in Parquet Courts, but the next record, Human Performance, there's a bit more traditional songwriting going on where the melody comes first and the lyrics kind of conform to that. So I think that's, if there was a big stylistic shift, or if people interpret a big stylistic shift, which I don't think it's big, but, there's at least as much of a shift that there are in other records, it's because I changed my songwriting style up a bit. There are still some songs that go by the old way, and I'm sure there always will be, but this was the first time I kind of needed to mix it up a bit in Parquet Courts. Because, I think part of the reason that the band has a kind of sort of rhythmic quality that we do is that it starts with words, and things kind of would always conform to the words and the phrasing, and that's it's harder to build a melody around that.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the thing. I think originally I probably considered myself more of a wordsmith, but I realized that it's better just to kind of. It's easier to fit stuff into the song if the song comes first. I'm always there when they're coming up with the song, but I'd much rather have it sound good and then try to. Yeah,
it's definitely easier.
Yeah.
So are there proto-martyr practices where you just don't show up, where the rest of them are just kind of working on stuff? Or are you always there?
I wish that there was, but no, I'm always there. And what's really frustrating is there is thousands and thousands, no, not thousands, dozens and dozens of recordings where they're just kind of jamming on a song, and I'm like on fire. I'm like, oh, it's the greatest, and I go home and I come up with a bunch of stuff, and then the next practice I'm like, hey, let's do that one that we did yesterday, and they're like, nah, we don't want to do that. And so I have all these words, and I'm hoping that we get famous enough that people will go through our dregs and want to release everything that we've ever done, because there's some good stuff, But I appreciate that process of editing and killing the baby.
Speaking of killing the baby, you at one time you advocated throwing from the rocks adults that dress like children, and what is it, Rich Krusties?
Yeah.
Who else
Krusties,
met that fate?
Well, it's changed. We haven't been playing that song on this tour, but I have. There's Human Dieldrin, which is just human scum, basically. What else was in there? Catheters, because I watch the channels I watch on TV all have ads for catheters for some reason. I guess it's mostly for life insurance and catheters. So, and I've only been catheterized once, and it wasn't a pleasure. Did not enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad, if nothing else, this brought us together to be able to hang out over the internet like this, Joe.
Yeah, no, it's the best.
All right, Joe, good talking, man. Hope to see you soon in real life.
Yep, bye-bye.
False happiness is on the rise. See the victims piled high in a room without a roof.
Hi, I'm Elia Einhorn, and you've been listening to Andrew Savage of Parquet Courts and Joe Casey of Proto-Martyr on the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Subscribe to Talkhouse Music and Talkhouse Film podcasts on Stitcher or iTunes. Upcoming episodes include RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan in conversation with Interpol's Paul Banks on their new project Banks and Steels, and Dan Deacon with Andrew W.K. This episode was edited and co-produced by Mark Yoshizumi and premiered on Pitchfork Radio. Till next time,